Hello students, I am Dr. Saliha Jamal, Faculty Department of Geography, Aligarh Muslim University, Aligarh. So today again we are here with the course Climate Change Vulnerability and Adaptation, and today's topic of discussion is sea level changes. We in this series or in this week we are talking about generally the extreme events of the climate change, in which we have studied various other events. Today we are going to discuss about the sea level changes, and this is one of the direct, we can say, repercussions of the climate change. When we talk about sea level changes, we can see here that through the data also that global mean sea level has risen about 8 to 9 inches, round about we can say almost on an average 21 to 24 centimeters since 1880. It is consistently it is increasing. Here in this graph you can see the changes are consistently increasing, and it is predicted that this will continue to increase. What is that this will continue to increase, because whatever the rate of global warming we are seeing, and it is a direct repercussion of the global warming that sea levels are changing. So this change in the rise in the sea level will continue according to the predictions. The rise has been consistent throughout the 20th century, which is very much visible from this particular graph. You can see that it is very much visible. The rise has been consistent throughout the 20th century, and what is the rate? That is 0.06 inches per year from 1880 onwards to 2013, but the rate doubled after 2013, that is 0.12 inches per year since 1993. See the change. Firstly it was 0.06 inches per year, then it was 0.12 inches per year. The rate has just doubled, and even the trend is expected to continue, whatever the projections we are having regarding the rise of sea level. And the projections say that the rise of at least 1 foot above 2000 levels by the end of the century, and even under low greenhouse gas emission. If the greenhouse gas emission is being also slowed down, then also these changes will continue according to the predictions. So actually, what are the mechanism which causes the sea level changes? There are major two mechanism which causes the sea level changes. That is, first one, the thermal expansion of seawater, and another is melting of ice sheet and glaciers. Why it becomes important to study about the sea level changes? We know that sea level changes mostly impacts the coastal areas, the coastal communities, and even we can say the ecosystem, the aquatic ecosystem, marine ecosystem, and the coastal ecosystem. That may be, here I can quote example, it impacts the mangroves, and also it impacts the coastal economies. That's why as it is impacting not only the economies but even the population, the community living there, and overall the ecosystem of certain region, then it becomes very crucial now to study about what are the mechanism which is causing sea level to rise. And here what I have said, the thermal expansion of seawater and the melting of ice sheets and the glacier are the major two mechanisms due to which the sea level rise takes place. Let us start to discuss about the thermal expansion. What exactly the thermal expansion is? As we know that global temperature is rising, that is the global warming. This temperature rise, due to this the oceans are also warming. Their temperature are increasing. When the temperature, ocean water temperature rises, the molecules, the water molecules, due to rise in temperature, they will move apart from each other. This movement of the molecules apart from each other causes the expansion of water, which is known as thermal expansion of water. Simply we can say global temperature rise, due to global temperature rise, ocean water warms and expands. And how this expansion takes place? Due to this warming, the water molecules moves apart from each other and expansion of water takes place, which is known as thermal expansion, and which contributes almost, we can say, half of the if we talk about the magnitude, this thermal expansion has accounted for about half of the observed sea level rise over the past century. So, as the temperature continue to rise, the contribution of thermal expansion is expected to increase. Thus, how the thermal expansion contributes to sea level rise. A very interesting diagram here where the thermal expansion is the main cause of the sea level, we have said, and its contribution to the global sea level. Here you can see the annual averages, that is about 1993 to 2010 period, and the average was 3.2 millimeter per year. You can see here this data. The average is 3.2 millimeter per year, with the contributions from various other sources that may even include water stored on land in forms of snow or etc. So, here you can see this diagram shows the contribution. You can see the contribution through the Antarctic ice sheet, that is 0.27 millimeter, through the Greenland 0.3 millimeter, glaciers 0.86 millimeter. But when we talk about the thermal expansion, it is nearly about 1.1 millimeter. So, what we have said that the thermal expansion generally accounts for about half of the observed sea level rise. There are two mechanisms for the sea level rise. We have seen, that is one, the thermal expansion of seawater, which almost contributes half of the sea level rise. Then we have other sources through the melting of ice sheets, glaciers, etc. And what actually this diagram explains how the Antarctic ice sheet, Greenland ice sheet, the glaciers are contributing to the sea level rise, and maximum here we can say the thermal expansion contributes the most to the sea level rise. Now, melting of ice sheets and glaciers. We have lots of different ice sheets. So, the most important one, Greenland ice sheet, Antarctic ice sheet, glaciers retreat also have been observed due to the increase of temperature. If we talk about the Greenland ice sheet, it is melting at an very much accelerated rate, and the reason is the rise of temperature, global warming, which contributes significantly to the global sea level rise by adding large volumes of fresh water which flow into the ocean due to the melting of these ice sheet. Not only this, Greenland ice sheet, if we talk about Antarctic ice sheet, it is also losing its mass mainly due to the melting of ice shelves and the glacier. It's melting of its ice shelves and the glacier. And how this loss of the ice sheet is driven? That is mainly by the warmer ocean water, which erodes the underside of these ice shelves and thus increasing the surface melting. Once the underside of the ice shelves melted, it is very much obvious it will increase the surface melting also, thus contributing to the sea level rise. Various glacial retreats are now being from few decades. The rate of these glacial retreats have increased due to the global warming, mainly rise in temperature worldwide. If we can give example here, like the glaciers on Himalayas, Alps, Rockies, which are retreating at a very high rate, and the melting of these glaciers, these are adding fresh water to the oceans, which contributes to the further sea level rise. So, another mechanism which contributes to the sea level rise is the melting of ice sheets and the glaciers. So, remember students, these are the two major mechanisms, the thermal expansion and then we can say the melting of ice sheets and glacier, which contributes to the sea level rise. Here you can see the picture, one that has been taken in September 1989 of different places, that is of we can say the places like Flajokul, then Holarjokul, then there are the place that is known as Shaftafeljokul. So these are the different places whose pictures have been taken in different time period. One in 1989 in August, in the second one is in August 2020. What actually it shows the alarming situation mainly related to the snow, how the Iceland glaciers have shrunk in the 30 years. The differences you can see. If we talk about this particular region, here no ice is visible now. See the depth of the thickness of the ice. Now see in this region, now here in this portion which was having so much ice in this portion, now in August 2020 there is no ice sheet. Again here you can see here the glacier which was in 1989, it was present. Now see the amount of glacier that is present in 2020. Lot of changes have taken place. Similar is the case if you see glacial cover here over the top of the mountains. Again you can see the glacial cover. Lot of reduction have already, these glaciers have shrunken in these 3 decades. Now talking about the ice loss from the ice caps, that is about the mountain glaciers. These are also melting with an very much unprecedented rates due to the rising temperatures, mainly contributing to the sea level rise. So not only this impacts the sea level by rising its level, but it also affects the fresh water availability for the communities which generally depend upon the glacier meltwater, particularly in the dry seasons. So on one hand side, this glacial melts, that is impacting or contributing to the sea level rise. On other hand, it is impacting the communities which rely on this snow melt water, mainly we can say in the drier season. So this glacial melting, if we talk about the glacial melting rate, it has increased a lot if we compare it from the previous data. The World Meteorological Organization in 2022, that is the State of Climate Report, highlighted that between 2021 and 22, just you see the span of the time, just between the 2021 and 22, additional 6% of glacier ice volume was lost. See how unprecedented rate the glacier melting is going on. What will this melting do? It is very much obvious that this melting will contribute significantly to the sea level rise by adding fresh water, and also it will affect the water resources in many regions, mainly the communities who are dependent on this water resource. Here you can take example, these images of the lakes west of the Tangla mountains, that is a small range in the central part of the Tibetan plateau. This offer a view of change caused in part by retreating glacier. Just see in 1987, lots of, you can see the snow caps, snowpack. You can see here lots of, but in 2024 almost from all these regions that has been melted, that has been retreated. So you can specifically very much clearly you can see the differences. So climate change, due to the climate change, we have already talked about that direct impact of the climate change can be seen in the sea level rise with certain mechanism. Not only this, that even the climate change can change the ocean current circulation. It impacts the ocean current. For example, mainly the polar areas, when warming is continuing, we know that global warming is going on, temperature is consistently rising of this planet Earth. So mainly in the polar areas, we see the temperature of the water will comparatively increase, have already increased as compared to the if we talk about 20, 30, 40 years back. Thus, increase in the temperature that will decrease the density of the water. If the density of the water decrease, there will be the problem in the movement. The water will not sink in the polar areas, because from the tropical areas water move as a surface currents. We can say, just like we can have the Gulf Stream, Kuroshio and etc. And from this is mainly, and from the polar areas, due to the lower temperature, denser water, the water sinks. If the temperature will rise, this sinking of the water will reduce. That will bring somewhat a weakening of the ocean current. That will cause the weakening of the ocean current. So this climate change can alter the ocean current and various circulation patterns, which will impact the regional sea levels. For example, if there are some changes in the Gulf Stream which leads to localized sea level rise in some of the areas, while the other region will experience sea level decline. So, lot of changes in the circulation pattern can also be observed due to the climatic changes. Here you can see melting of polar ice is weakening the ocean current. Very simple thing to understand. When melting of the polar ice takes place, when rise of temperature takes place, the polar areas temperature will also rise a bit, due to which what it will happen, the density of the water will decrease, then it will weaken the current. The density of the water will decrease, then it will weaken the current. The melt water makes sea water less salty. Again, if there is once the temperature is increasing, the water density is decreasing. On the other hand side, the addition of more water, that is melting of polar ice and all, the addition of more water, fresh water, that will make the sea water less salty, thus again decreasing its density. Therefore, lighten and slower to sink, means the currents will weaken, the pattern of circulation will weaken, because denser water sinks and lighter water, what we have seen, that moves as a surface current. So, this circulation pattern also will be impacted with the changes observed by the climate change. So, overall, if we see, everything is connected in some system, it creates a feedback mechanism. If we talk about in terms of the albedo effect, we know the ice and snow is melting due to the rise in temperature. When it melts, it exposes the darker portion of the ocean, and it also exposes the land surface. When the ice melts, then the land surface will be exposed, and when it is exposed, it will absorb more heat. Further, when it will absorb more heat, it will accelerate, it will increase the warming, and which in turn will increase the melting of ice. What is this? This is creating a sort of feedback loop that contributes to the ongoing sea level rise. Means, due to the melting of ice, we can say ice and snow is having high albedo, we can say. So, due to the once melting of the ice, the we can say darker ocean is exposed. Due to the melting of ice, the land surfaces are exposed, which absorb more heat. Once it absorbs more heat, warming will increase, and this accelerated warming will increase ice melting, and this increased ice melting will contribute to the sea level rise. So, it creates sort of we can say feedback loop, which is known as feedback mechanism. Similarly, if we see this in terms of the reflection, we see that ice and snow is having high albedo, meaning they reflect most of the ice. Being the white surface, this ice and snow that reflect most of the sunlight. But when they melt, the darker surfaces are exposed. Even the land areas are exposed, which absorb more radiation, thus reducing the overall Earth's reflectivity, again increasing the temperature, and this increased temperature will increase the rate of ice melt, that will again contribute to the sea level rise. So overall warming feedback loop is produced. So here you can see change in reflectivity of the Earth's surface from March 1, 2000 to December 31, 2011, means how the reflectivity changes, because already we have discussed in previous slide, students, that ice and snow is having high albedo, means high reflectivity, but once the ice melt, even the surface, we can say darker surface of the ocean is exposed, even the land are exposed, which absorbs more heat and thus overall reducing the Earth's reflectivity. So how it is impacting the reflectivity, you can see lots of negative changes. You can see from the orange to blue, that are negative change towards the orange, and towards the blue we are having the positive change. So you can see in the North Pole, here you can overall you can see lots of negative changes have already taken place as compared to the South Pole. Also in the South Pole, the negative changes have taken place in terms of the change in reflectivity. So not only in that we have seen in the feedback mechanism related to the albedo effect, warming feedback loop, but such type of feedback mechanism is also seen in increasing the atmospheric moisture, because we know due to the global warming, temperature is increasing. This rising temperature, where the warm air has the potential to hold more moisture, which leads to increased precipitation in many of the region. Thus, it contributes to the rise in the sea level, especially in the areas which is experiencing the land subsidence, because higher moisture retention we see, warmer air has a greater capacity to hold moisture. If it has the greater capacity to hold moisture, which will result in higher humidity, and which will in turn result in the intense precipitation events, thus contributing to the sea level rise. Again, it is creating a feedback mechanism that is related to each other. The enhanced moisture content will lead to the more frequent and the severe rainfall, mostly in the coastal region if we talk about, which will increase the flooding event, and this may contribute to the sea level rise. So overall, a feedback mechanism is created in these areas. Not only this, in the areas of the land subsidence, maybe the land subsidence may be caused due to the natural factor, or maybe even due to the it is fueled by the human driven factors. Some coastal areas are experiencing the land subsidence many times due to the natural geologic processes like groundwater extraction, some tectonic disturbances and all, and many times they experience the subsidence due to the human activities. This subsidence exacerbates the effects of the rising sea levels, because land subsides, the rising sea level, that mechanism will exacerbate, that may lead to the flooding risk, or we can say storm surges, etc. Not only this, the urban development in the coastal areas, or we can say the reclamation of land in the coastal areas, that can also lead to the land subsidence in those areas, making this region more vulnerable to the sea level rise. So after seeing the feedback mechanism and its impact in the coastal areas due to the land subsidence and all, now we are going to see about the regional variations in the sea level rise, because On an average, we have seen the data, how much sea level rise is taking place, and we have compared it from the previous data, and we have found that sea level rise and the rate of sea level rise is consistently increasing, and it is also predicted for the future that it will increase. But this sea level rise is not similar for every region, for every place on this earth. There is uneven distribution of the sea level rise. It is not uniform globally. Some region may experience higher sea level rise, maybe due to the various factors like we can say changing pattern of the ocean currents, maybe due to the coastal subsidence, that is the land subsidence, and even due to the local geologic conditions. So some of the regions may experience higher level of sea rise as compared to the others. If we can give example, regions mainly impacted by the higher level of sea rise, you can quote here the US East Coast and Gulf of Mexico. These two regions are experiencing more rapid sea level rise compared to the other regions. You can see here impact of sea level rise, because the first area that is impacted by the sea level rise, it is very much obvious, that is the coastal area. So it impacts the coastal communities and the, we can say, overall ecosystem, that is coastal and even the marine and the aquatic ecosystem. So rising, how it impacts, these rising sea levels can increase various risk. Many times we have talked about, like coastal flooding, particularly during the storms and the high tides. These coastal floodings, storms, hurricanes, that is real very hazardous threat, I can say, to the coastal infrastructure, mainly to the homes and the coastal ecosystem. So it may impact the infrastructure, homes, and overall the ecosystem of a place. How it impacts the coastal communities and the ecosystem through the flooding and storm surges, salt water intrusion takes place. This rising sea levels that has the potential and that leads to salt water intrusions in freshwater aquifers. So when the salt water intrudes in the freshwater aquifers, it will impact the drinking water supplies, not only the drinking water supplies, but it will also disrupt the water supply for the agricultural land. Not only this, the sea level rise also leads to the coastal erosion. It increases the coastal erosion rate, leading to the loss of beaches and even also the loss of coastal habitats. Many times when we are talking about the coastal areas are the first areas or the most vulnerable areas due to the, which are impacted due to the sea level rise. So it not only impacts the community, when we talk about it impacts the certain infrastructure, homes and the coastal habitats, overall ecosystem, like it impacts them, it destroys the mangroves. So in one and other way it is impacting the ecosystem, but it also impacts the communities. Many times it causes the displacement of the communities due to the due to the rising sea levels, and even because of increase in flooding, which leads to the social and economic challenges. Marine ecosystem is also being affected by the sea level rise, because coastal habitat loss we can see due to the sea level rise, because coastal area inundate with the sea water, and thus the coastal habitat loss takes place. Many times the ecosystem like wetlands, mangroves, these are affected by the sea level rise. If such type of ecosystem is affected, which serves a very important role, or which are the most important ecosystem for the biodiversity and the coastal protection. If this is lost, if this ecosystem like wetlands and mangroves are affected, then it directly and indirectly it will impact the other sectors, whether we talk about the economy or community or the other ecosystem, because everything are linked in some sort of system. If one is affected, it will affect the other things which are linked to it. So not only this, if we talk about the marine ecosystem, how can we forget to talk about the coral reefs? We know sea level is rising, and sea level rise is the effect of the global temperature rise. When global temperature rise takes place, then the water temperature also, marine water temperature also rises. So these two factors can impact coral reef health, leading to the bleaching of coral reef and even the loss of the biodiversity, because coral reefs are regarded as one of the rich biodiversity. So students, that's all for today's class. We have discussed how the sea level rise is taking place. So as we are dealing with the paper climate change vulnerability and adaptation, so what I have said, that sea level rise is one of the direct effect of the climate change, because if we talk about the climate change, we talk about the global warming, rise in temperature, and this rise in temperature that is having the direct repercussion on the sea level changes. And mainly we have seen the data how the sea level changes are taking place. It is increasing consistently. If we talk about the rate of sea level rise consistently and predicted for consistent rise even for the future also, and mainly it takes place by the two mechanisms, that is the thermal expansion of seawater and melting of ice sheets. These are the major two contributors of the sea level rise that we have seen. Then we have also seen how the ice loss and the ice cap contributes to the sea level rise. Now due to this sea level rise, there are certain changes, we can say the certain sections which are impacted. For example, this sea level rise and even we can say climate change can impact the ocean current circulation. How it impacts, already we have discussed. There are certain feedback mechanism, because each system are interwoven, linked one to another. If one is impacted, then other will be impacted. So certain feedback mechanism have been created, because once the snow melt, here we have seen, in short I am discussing again, once the snow melts, then we can say the darker ocean is exposed, the land is exposed, then it will absorb more heat. When it will absorb more heat, it will accelerate global warming, and then again this warming will exacerbate the ice melting, and this ice melting will contribute to the sea level rise. A sort of feedback mechanism is created. Not only this, but even to the how the warmer air holds more moisture, and this more moisture can lead to severe and extreme rainfall to various places, which may also contribute to sea level rise. So another feedback mechanism is created. It also, we can see the sea level rise can also can be exacerbated through the land subsidence. Maybe we can say through the natural cause, or maybe the human driven causes. And this sea level rise have different can be noted differently in different places. There are lots of variation can be seen, and this rise is not uniform globally, and mainly it impacts the coastal communities and the ecosystem by coastal flooding, mainly by the storm surges, thus impacting the home infrastructure and ecosystem of the coastal areas. It causes salt water intrusion, coastal erosion, displacement of communities. It impacts the habitat loss takes place, and also it impacts the coral reef. So this is just a brief review what we have discussed. So that's all for today's lecture, students. Have a nice day. Thank you.